BMI. So I've said body composition is one of the 5 health-related fitness components, that body composition is water, bone, muscle, and fat, that there are real and serious comorbidities that often accompany obesity, and that we should pay attention to the scale because it's a proven weight loss and weight maintenance tool, and striving to move closer to a healthy weight is a healthy and worthy endeavor. All right? So now I'll share with you the first body composition method. It's BMI. BMI is a quick, easy, completely non-invasive math calculation. You see it right up top there, based only on height and weight. If you know your height and weight, you can calculate the BMI. If you're American, then the formula is weight in pounds divided by height in inches squared, and then multiply that times 703. We, of course, don't need formulas these days. We Google it, and instantly there are charts and calculators galore, but at least you know the formula. It is based on a formula. BMI determines whether someone is underweight, see that less than 18.5 down there, normal weight, 18.5 to 24.9, not 24.5. Overweight, obese, 30 to 39.9, morbidly obese, 40 to 49.9, and super morbidly obese, 50 plus. But here's the thing about BMI, it's just a math calculation. BMI doesn't care what proportion of your weight is fat or muscle. Therefore, BMI can mistakenly convict a thickly muscled athlete as over-fat, even though they are lean. Check out this pro bodybuilder, 5'10", 250 pounds, 5% body fat, but by BMI, he's obese because his BMI is 37. And as you just saw a second ago, right there, obese, 30 to 39.9. His BMI is 37. He's obese. So here's the deal. 99.99, not 99%, 99.99% of people do not have too much muscle. Let me say that again. 99.99% of people do not have too much muscle. So BMI doesn't usually get it wrong because the person has too much muscle. And I say it that way with that accentuation and that over-exaggeration and that enunciation and everything I did because so often BMI gets a bad rap because it's, oh my God, it's convicting all these people with all this muscle of being obese. There aren't that many people with too much muscle. There just aren't. If we look at it, 7 billion people on Earth, or if we just stay right here in the United States and we say 330, 350 million people in the United States, 99.99% of people do not have too much muscle. That's going to screw up BMI. Okay? But here's the deal. So that's the kind of knock that away where we say BMI is all screwed up, because of that. There are a couple people in our group, maybe 3, who have the amount of muscle that would screw up BMI, something like that. It's not very many, okay? But anyway, here's the deal. So that's that side. BMI can miss it because it can miss the people with lots of muscle. Where BMI is even more likely to get it wrong is the skinny fat person. BMI can give credit to someone at a healthy weight, but who has far too little muscle and too much fat. This can happen at any age, but is far more likely to occur in those middle-aged and older who don't regularly do resistance training to preserve muscle, and they don't prevent sarcopenia because they don't do resistance training. Sarcopenia remembers the natural loss of muscle with aging. Hence the skinny fat designation. They are thin in clothes, but their body fat is too high. So in this guy, if he were 5'10 and 173 pounds, he'd be in the normal weight range. Just barely, but he'd be inside the normal weight because anything under 25 BMI, you're in the normal weight range there, okay, as long as you're above 18.5. So if his BMI is 24.8, he's in the normal weight range, but his body fat's 24%, which is poor, and he's 1% away as a male from being obese. 25%, I'll tell you more about that later, but a body fat of 25%, or I should say greater than 25% as a male, is obese. So whether BMI says you are at a healthy weight, overweight, or obese, it's at least worth mentioning that you can be any of those categories, healthy weight, overweight, or obese, and be metabolically unhealthy. So what does being metabolically unhealthy mean? Well, a well-recognized way to determine this is to look at something called the metabolic syndrome. The American Heart Association says the metabolic syndrome is a group of 5 conditions that can lead to heart disease, diabetes, stroke, and other health problems. Metabolic syndrome is diagnosed when someone has 3 or more of the risk factors you see on the screen. 3 or more of the 5 risk factors, then you have metabolic syndrome. Those risk factors are, of course, high blood pressure, high levels of triglycerides in the blood, large waist circumference or an apple-shaped body, low levels of HDL, the good cholesterol in the blood, and high blood glucose, high blood sugar in other words, okay? Elevated fasting blood sugar as it says there on the screen. Although each of these is a risk factor for cardiovascular disease, when a person has 3 or more and is diagnosed with metabolic syndrome, the chance of developing a serious cardiovascular condition increases. For example, high blood pressure is an important risk factor for cardiovascular disease, but when combined with high fasting blood sugar levels and abdominal obesity, in other words, the large waistline, the chance for developing cardiovascular disease is even higher. Metabolic syndrome is a serious health condition that puts people at higher risk of heart disease, diabetes, stroke, and diseases related to fatty buildups in artery walls, in other words, atherosclerosis. Okay? Metabolic syndrome, it's a real thing. It's talked about all over. Again, extremely medically solid, scientifically sound. American Heart Association, any organization worth their salt is aware of, talks about, knows about metabolic syndrome. It's a real thing. If you've got 3 of those 5 things, you have metabolic syndrome. Now, underlying causes of metabolic syndrome include, why am I including all this here? I thought this was on body composition. Well, it's because almost number 1 is overweight and obesity. Overweight and obesity. Because of the comorbidities. Overweight and obesity brings with it insulin resistance. Doesn't bring with it physical activity, but it can be contributed to because of physical inactivity, but also genetic factors and increasing age. Okay, so those are the underlying causes of metabolic syndrome. Overweight and obesity with all its comorbidities plus the other things you see there. Okay, by the way, if you're obese, you are insulin resistant. All right, so again, this is all kind of body composition, body fat. It's very, very important that we understand the contribution of obesity to metabolic syndrome, the contribution of obesity to health, the contribution of obesity to fitness, lifespan, health span. All right? So can you have metabolic syndrome and be at a healthy weight? Yes. Researchers define this as metabolically unhealthy normal weight. They abbreviate it MUNW, metabolically unhealthy normal weight. And research indicates the prevalence of metabolically unhealthy normal weight affects about 30% of normal weight persons globally. 30%. Remember when I said that the person who has too much muscle, I said 99.99% of people don't have too much muscle, that it's going to screw up BMI? Remember when I said that BMI, where it really misses the mark, is on the people who are skinny fat or the people who have too high a body fat but are at a normal weight? Well, this goes right along with that, because the research is saying that about 30% of normal weight persons globally, 30% have or are metabolically unhealthy normal weight. So another way to say it is 30% of skinny people are actually fat on the inside. So BMI can wrongly convict that tiny, tiny fraction of the population with a lot of muscle, and it can wrongly exonerate the normal weight but over fat person. In other words, the skinny fat. Even so, sounds like I have just blasted BMI. It's worthless. It's going to get the people, it's going to screw up the people who have too much muscle. It's going to screw up and miss this 30% of people who are metabolically unhealthy but at a normal weight because they're skinny fat. It's just a mess. It's worthless. That is not the case at all. I can definitely get why, after listening to me here, you might say, man, he's not high on BMI at all. Actually, BMI, for the way it's designed, for what it's for, being an easy calculation, non-invasive, free, simple, it does its job of being that quick, easy, no-cost, rule of thumb measure of fatness. All right, let's keep it what it is. Quick, easy, no-cost, rule of thumb measure of fatness. Okay, but really, if we want to get a better idea of whether our body composition is at the sickness, wellness, or fitness level, BMI needs at least two friends to help clarify what's going on. And they are waist to hip ratio and body composition measurement directly. All right, so let's talk about this. Let's go with waist circumference first. Before I hit the waist to hip ratio, let me quickly hit the simple waist circumference measurement. There's good data, again, scientifically sound, medically relevant, relied upon by the medical community and research community as being reliable in determining whether someone is obese, and it's this. It's a simple measurement. Waist circumference can be used as an indicator for determining obesity. Waist circumference alone. Now, I wouldn't use it as my sole indicator, but it can be one indicator for sure. Using a stretch-resistant tape, you measure the waist just above the belly button like it shows there. And I'll show you a better image in a video in a second. But anyway, if you look at that chart on the right, the American Heart Association and the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute say that women with a waist circumference greater than 35 inches and men with a waist circumference greater than 40 inches, respectively, have abdominal obesity. And it's the abdominal obesity is the most risky type of obesity. Remember, the apple-shaped person has a higher risk, generally speaking, than the pear-shaped person. The more abdominal obesity we have, the more obesity we have at the central region around the midsection, the more risk we have. All right? So, but look at this. Look at what the International Diabetes Federation says right below. It has tighter limitations, and they say women with a waist circumference greater than 31.5 inches and men with a waist circumference greater than 35.5 inches, respectively, have abdominal obesity. So which one do you want to pay attention to? Either one. You know, which one's better, which one's more relevant? I don't know. I think you probably get people, you can get physicians and researchers probably into a fist fight over that. Bottom line is, I would just go with either one, but if you go with the one up top, if you've got a waist that's greater than 35, you know, it's something to pay attention to. You know, if your waist is 35.5, let's relax. You know, I mean, come on. It's not like, there's no line in the sand where it's like, it's at 36, I've just cut 5 years off my life. No, it's just an indicator that you want to pay attention to it. You may want to do something about it. It just depends. There's other factors that go into this, okay? But definitely, you know, when you start getting, hey, I'm a female and my waist is 50. Hey, I'm a male and my waist is 60. You can see here that we've got a serious issue going on, okay? And it doesn't have to be that high to have a serious issue. I'm just kind of making that exaggeration. Just look at these numbers just to give you an idea of what's going on, okay? Let's look at the waist to hip ratio. So that waist to hip ratio is the ratio of the circumference of the waist to that of the hips. And this is calculated as the waist measurement divided by the hip measurement. For example, a person with a 30-inch waist and 38-inch hips has a waist to hip ratio of 0.78. Okay? Because you take 30 divided by 38, that's 0.78. So just as I said before, use that stretch resistant tape like you see them doing there. The waist is measured just above the belly button. Hip circumference should be measured around the widest portion of the buttocks. For both the waist and the hip measurements, the tape should be parallel to the floor. For both measurements, the individual should wear little clothing, stand with feet close together, arms at the side. Your body weight should be distributed evenly. The person should be relaxed. The measurements should be taken at the end of a normal respiration. Each measurement should be repeated twice. If the measurements are within a half inch of one another, the average should be calculated. If the difference between the two measurements exceeds a half inch, the two measurements should be repeated. You want to get good data, okay? So just make sure you're within a half inch on your two measurements, and then average the two measurements. If you're not within a half inch, take two more measurements until you can get within a half inch. The waist to hip ratio has been used as an indicator or measure of health and the risk of developing serious health conditions. Research shows that people with apple-shaped bodies, like I said a bit ago, more weight around the waist, face more health risks than those with pear-shaped bodies, more weight around the hips. The waist to hip ratio has been found to be a more efficient predictor of mortality in older people greater than 75 years of age than waist circumference or BMI. The waist-hip ratio has been shown to be a better predictor of cardiovascular disease than waist circumference and body mass index. The fairest analysis of obesity risk for the waist to hip ratio is by gender and age. As you can, let me see. Hang on a second here. I got to post a different one. Let me see where I'm at. Here we go. All right. As you can see from the chart, the ratio naturally goes up with age. So, in other words, they allow that ratio to go up because of age, because otherwise you're punishing the people who are older as being unhealthy when they're not unhealthy. And what they found is that ratio can go up, that waist to hip ratio can go up with age, and the person can still be quite healthy, quite fit. And it's okay. It's just a normal part of aging. All right. So if you look at that chart, you know, a 20 to 29-year-old has a low risk of complications related to obesity if his ratio is less than 0.83. See that for men, 0.83. And then for the woman who's 20 to 29, if her ratio is less than 0.71. All right. And that man who's 50 to 59 has the same low risk if his ratio is less than 0.90, and the female if hers is less than 0.74. All right? All right. So there's your waist to hip